Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to tackle a question that, let's be honest, has probably driven every single one of us crazy at some point. We're going to explore this really unique framework, not from a psychologist, but from a lawyer who literally builds a case for why some beliefs just seem to be set in stone. All right, let's jump right in.
You've been there, right? You're in that debate, you're laying out the facts, the logic, you've got the evidence right there, and you get nothing. The other person just will not budge an inch. It seriously feels like you're talking to a brick wall. So what is actually going on inside that unchangeable mind?
So this is where a guy named Victor Zammit, a retired attorney, comes into the picture. Now, after spending decades dealing with paranormal skeptics, he put his legal mind to work. He didn't just throw his hands up in frustration. No, he built a case. He argues there are 9 specific, almost technical reasons why some people will cling to their beliefs no matter what evidence you show them.
So let's crack open the case file, shall we? Zammit's first arguments, his Exhibit A, they all focus on these powerful and, often totally unconscious psychological defense systems that stand guard over our core beliefs.
First up is a big one, cognitive dissonance. Zammit's point is that when someone sees information that seriously threatens a belief they hold dear, it doesn't spark curiosity, not at all. It sparks anxiety. It's this deeply uncomfortable feeling, and the brain's first job is to make that feeling go away, fast. And according to his case, it happens in 4 pretty clear steps. First, the person is confronted with the new evidence. Second, their brain just gets flooded with anxiety. He even says, their blood pressure probably spikes. So, to stop that awful feeling, they start to rationalize their original belief, and then boom, they hit the final stage, total denial. They just reject the new info completely to get back to their happy place.
Next in the file, Zammit brings up this idea of cathexis. He describes it as this unconscious superglue that bonds a person to an idea. It's not just that they like the idea, they are deeply psychologically attached to it. And because that bond is so strong, and they're not even aware of it, when you challenge it, they don't just disagree with you, they often attack you for causing them that anxiety.
And this third defense mechanism he pulls from neurolinguistic programming, well, this one's even more wild. The argument here is that to avoid all that anxiety and dissonance, the mind does something incredibly direct. It doesn't just argue or rationalize it. It literally deletes the information. It's as if you never even showed them the evidence in the first place. Poof. Gone.
All right, moving on to Exhibit B in Zammit's case, because, he argues, it's not all just happening inside our heads. He claims our most stubborn beliefs are also shaped and locked in place by some really powerful outside forces right from the day we're born.
He calls this environmental programming. And honestly, it's a pretty straightforward idea. Your zip code has a huge impact on your belief system. As he puts it, if you take a hardcore materialist skeptic from New York and you imagine they'd been born in India instead, they'd almost certainly be a Hindu. Our environment gives us our default settings, and you have to consciously work to change them. But it's not just about where you grew up. Zammit points to something a lot more, practical, that can keep a mind shut tight. He argues that sometimes the main motivation isn't about finding the truth, it's about pure and simple survival in your career. For some people, and Zammit points specifically to scientists here, holding on to a skeptical view might be directly connected to their funding, their influence, their status with their colleagues, or, just keeping their job. If you challenge the accepted view, you could risk losing everything.
And to back this up, he throws out a pretty compelling historical example. Remember those old ads? The ones with scientists and lab coats stating that smoking was actually healthy for you? Or think about all the times certain drugs were pushed as perfectly safe. His point is that money and funding can create a very, very powerful reason to ignore any evidence that goes against the grain.
Okay, for our next exhibit, Exhibit C, we're going even deeper. We're moving past psychology and society, and we're going right down to the actual physical wiring of our brains. Zammit's idea here is that our beliefs create literal filters that change how we see reality.
This is his biological argument. Zammit suggests that when you hold a really rigid belief for a long time, you carve these fixed, deep neural pathways in your brain. Think of it like a path in a forest. The more you walk it, the deeper it gets. A new contradictory idea? That's like trying to blaze a whole new trail through thick underbrush. The brain just defaults to the easy, worn-in path, and that new information gets filtered out before it even has a chance.
All right, now this next one. This is probably the strangest, but maybe the most interesting part of Zammit's whole case.
He argues that some beliefs are so irrational and so deeply embedded that they act like a post-hypnotic suggestion, completely twisting how a person sees the world.
He uses this classic stage hypnosis experiment to explain it. Picture this. A hypnotist tells a volunteer on stage they're about to eat a sweet, delicious apple. Then he hands them a raw onion. The person takes a huge bite. And what happens? They don't gag, they don't spit it out, they smile and tell everyone how absolutely wonderful that apple was, even after they're out of the trance.
So that's the big question Zammit poses, right? Could a core belief that's been hammered into us since we were kids act just like that post-hypnotic suggestion? Could it be so powerful that our brain literally misinterprets the data from our own senses, that it makes us taste an onion and swear on our life it was an apple?
Okay, so we're reaching the end of the case file. These are Zammit's closing arguments. And here, he really zeroes in on what he sees as basic flaws in logic and, well, personal development that keep a mind firmly closed.
He calls out what he labels the smorgasbord argument, and he points his finger directly at people like the late great Professor Stephen Hawking. The idea is you go to the buffet of evidence and you only pick the things you already like, the stuff that confirms your existing beliefs, and you just walk right past anything that might challenge them.
And see, this is where his lawyer brain kicks in. He makes this brilliant contrast. He says a smorgasbord scientist can maybe get away with ignoring inconvenient facts, but a trial lawyer? No way. In a courtroom, you are legally obligated to deal with all the important evidence, especially the stuff that weakens your own case. If you ignored it, that would be malpractice.
Okay. His final point is, let's just say it's a provocative one. He uses a really outdated and controversial term, being spiritually retarded. Now, we have to be super clear here about what he means by this. It has zero to do with intelligence, zero to do with religion. For Zammit, being spiritual just means you have a developed ethical compass for selfless action. And he argues that if you lack that selfless core, it creates a huge blind spot that makes it impossible to look at evidence objectively. So, the evidence has been presented. Exhibits A, B, and C are on the table. What's the verdict here? What does this all add up to when it comes to understanding stubborn belief?
At the end of the day, Zammit's core argument is this. When you're arguing with someone and hitting a wall, you're not just fighting an opinion. You're up against an entire fortress, reinforced with psychological defense systems, external social pressures, hardwired biological filters, flawed logic, and even, he would say, ethical blind spots. It is a full-blown defense and death system.
And that really leaves us with one heck of a final thought, doesn't it? If a belief is protected by all these layers, this fortress of psychological walls, biological wiring, and social pressure, what on earth could possibly get through? What kind of experience or piece of evidence is powerful enough to finally bring those walls tumbling down? It's definitely something to think about.